What do you do when a church is spiraling into chaos? When false teachers are spreading division, and the very foundation of the community is at risk? This wasn't a hypothetical question for the early church in Ephesus. It was a real crisis. The Apostle Paul's response was a powerful personal letter to a young leader he trusted, Timothy. In this video, we're going to walk through that very letter, 1 Timothy, to uncover its timeless lessons on leadership, truth, and what it really means to be the household of God. Hello and welcome. The letter of 1 Timothy is one of the most practical and at times controversial books in the New Testament. It's absolutely packed with instructions that have shaped church life for 2 millennia. Today we want to give you a complete overview, exploring everything from the scholarly debates about its author to the spiritual lessons it offers us. We'll unpack the historical context and the practical wisdom hidden in this ancient letter, bringing it from the world of the first century right into our world today. To really get 1 Timothy, you first have to picture the city it was written to, Ephesus. In the first century, Ephesus was a bustling, influential port city in the Roman Empire. It was a major hub for trade, culture, and of course, religion. Its most famous landmark was the massive Temple of Artemis, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world which dominated the city's spiritual and economic life. This created a pluralistic and sometimes hostile environment for the small but growing Christian church. Into this pressure cooker, the Apostle Paul sent his trusted protege, Timothy. Timothy was a young leader, someone Paul called his true son in the faith, and he had a tough mission: bring order to a church that was struggling with internal chaos. The main problem was a group of false teachers causing division. They weren't just getting facts wrong. They were distracting the church with strange and speculative ideas, what Paul calls myths and endless genealogies. This was like a car spinning its wheels in the mud. Lots of noise and motion, but no forward spiritual progress, only useless debates instead of faith. These teachers also seemed to be driven by greed and a desire for status, which was leading people astray and disrupting the whole community. Now, who actually wrote this letter? This is a huge point of discussion among scholars. The letter opens by saying, Paul, an apostle of Christ Jesus. The traditional view, held for most of church history, is that the Apostle Paul wrote it, probably between AD 62 and 67, after being released from his first Roman imprisonment. However, for the last couple of centuries, many scholars have raised questions about whether Paul was the direct author. They point to differences in vocabulary and writing style compared to Paul's undisputed letters like Romans and Corinthians. They also suggest the church structure described in 1 Timothy, with its detailed rules for overseers and deacons, seems more developed than what we might expect during Paul's lifetime. On the other hand, defenders of Pauline authorship argue that the differences in style can be explained by the letter's unique purpose. Think of it like this. The way a CEO writes a formal, company-wide announcement is very different from how they'd text a personal, direct instruction to a trusted manager. They also suggest Paul might have used a secretary or amanuensis, which was a common practice. And they argue that the historical details fit within a plausible timeline of Paul's life after the events of the book of Acts. One of the most debated verses is 1 Timothy 5:18, where the author quotes the saying, "The laborer deserves his wages," which is also found in Luke's Gospel. But supporters counter that this could have been a well-known saying of Jesus that was circulating orally, much like a famous proverb that everyone knows and quotes long before it's written down in a book. Regardless of where you land on the authorship debate, the early church accepted this letter as authoritative and apostolic. Think of it like a cherished family recipe card. Even if you're not sure which great-grandparent wrote it down, the recipe itself is trusted, proven, and holds authority in the kitchen. In the same way, the church saw that this letter faithfully carried the teaching and authority of the apostles, and its message was essential for their health and guidance. It's helpful to see the letter as being built in a few key parts. It opens and closes with a direct commission to Timothy to confront the false teachers. These sections act like bookends for big blocks of practical instructions. Paul starts by getting straight to the point. Timothy's main job is to command certain people to stop teaching different doctrine. Paul's concern isn't just about being right, it's about the outcome of the teaching. He says the goal of true Christian instruction is love that issues from a pure heart and a good conscience and a sincere faith. True teaching is like healthy food that nourishes the body. The false teaching, by contrast, was like junk food. It might seem exciting, but it ultimately produced arrogance, division, and spiritual sickness. Paul then contrasts this with his own story. He calls himself the chief of sinners. a man who used to be a blasphemer and persecutor but received incredible mercy. This isn't self-pity, it's a powerful demonstration of the gospel's grace. It shows that Christian leadership isn't for the perfect, but for the redeemed. It's like how a doctor who has personally recovered from a serious illness is uniquely equipped to show empathy and guide other patients to health. After diagnosing the problem, Paul offers the solution, a well-ordered church. In chapter 2, he starts with prayer. He calls the church to pray for everyone, including kings and authorities, so they can live peaceful lives and the gospel can spread. This reflects God's own heart, as God desires all people to be saved and to come to the knowledge of the truth. This section also contains one of the most debated passages in the New Testament about the roles of men and women in worship. Understanding this passage requires careful work, like a detective examining every clue, the specific language, the historical situation, and the rest of the Bible, before drawing a conclusion. Some scholars highlight the disruptive influence of the local Artemis cult, where female priestesses held dominant roles, as a key part of the context. The text itself grounds its reasoning in the creation account from Genesis. From worship, Paul moves to leadership in chapter 3. He lays out the qualifications for the church's main leaders, overseers, and deacons. What's striking is that the list is almost entirely about character. An overseer must be above reproach, self-controlled, hospitable, and known for managing his own family well. The focus isn't on talent or charisma, but on moral integrity. Why? Because the church, Paul says, is the household of God. If someone can't manage their own family, how can they be expected to care for God's family? This section culminates in a beautiful creed or hymn in chapter 3 verse 16. This puts everything in perspective. Church order isn't about rules for their own sake. The rules are like a trellis for a vine. The trellis itself isn't the point, it exists to support the vine so it can grow strong and bear fruit. In the same way, the church's structure is meant to support the community so it can faithfully reflect the truth of who Jesus is, becoming the pillar and foundation of the truth. The final section of the letter gets into the nitty-gritty of church life. In chapter 4, Paul directly refutes some specific false teachings like forbidding marriage and demanding people abstain from certain foods. He pushes back, affirming that God's creation is good. Chapter 5 gives detailed instructions on how to care for different groups within the church family. Younger men should be treated like brothers, older women like mothers, and younger women like sisters. He offers practical criteria for supporting widows and outlines how to honor and, if necessary, discipline elders. Finally, in chapter 6, Paul circles back to the motivation of the false teachers, greed. This leads to one of the most famous and often misquoted verses. The love of money is a root of all kinds of evil. Money itself can be a tool, but the love of it is the problem. It's like fire. Under control it's a useful servant, but if it becomes your master it's a destructive force. Paul contrasts this with a call for contentment and a pursuit of what really matters. He gives Timothy one last stirring charge. Fight the good fight of the faith and guard the deposit entrusted to him. This deposit is the truth of the gospel, a priceless treasure that Timothy must protect, not to change or reinvent, but to preserve for the next generation. So, what does this nearly 2,000-year-old letter have to say to us? From the chaos in Ephesus to our own complex world, 1 Timothy is still a vital guide for the church. Here are 3 lessons that stand out. First, good teaching matters because it's supposed to produce love and godliness. In a world overflowing with misinformation and divisive opinions, 1 Timothy calls us back to the core truths of the gospel. The real test of our theology isn't how much we know but how much we love. It should lead to a pure heart, a clear conscience, and a sincere faith. Second, godly leadership is built on character, not charisma. The qualifications for leadership in chapter 3 are a powerful reality check to our modern obsession with celebrity and success. The church is called to look for leaders who are humble, self-controlled, hospitable, and faithful in their private lives. Integrity is the foundation of any real spiritual authority. Third, the church is meant to be God's well-ordered family. Paul's vision for the church is that of a household of God, a community that cares for its members, honors its leaders, and provides for the vulnerable. It's meant to be a community so marked by love, order, and truth that it stands as a pillar and foundation of the truth for a watching world. From the chaotic streets of first-century Ephesus to the challenges we all face today, 1 Timothy gives us a timeless blueprint for a healthy church. It's a call to guard the truth, to cultivate leaders of integrity, and to live together as the family of God. It reminds us that what we believe directly shapes how we live, and how we live together proclaims the truth about our magnificent King, Jesus Christ. If you found this survey of 1 Timothy helpful, please consider subscribing for more deep dives into the books of the Bible, and I'd love to hear from you in the comments. What's one lesson or theme from 1 Timothy that stands out to you the most right now? Thanks for watching.